Amara lived in a neighborhood where most families struggled to make ends meet. The streets were crowded with small shops, children playing barefoot, and people working hard just to survive another day. Her family was one of the poorest, but despite the challenges, Amara carried herself with quiet dignity. She was known for her sharp mind, kind heart, and a smile that gave hope to those around her. Her dream was clear from a young age. She wanted to become a doctor. Not because she was fascinated by science alone, but because she had watched too many people in her community suffer without proper health care. Her own father had passed away years earlier because he could not afford treatment at a private hospital. That memory never left her, and every time she opened her books at night, she reminded herself why she worked so hard. Her mother worked as a cleaner in offices across the city. Every morning, she would leave before sunrise and return long after dark, exhausted but still smiling for her daughter. They lived in a tiny two-room apartment with cracked walls, an old fan that rattled through the night, and a table stacked high with Amara's textbooks. For years, her mother reminded her, "Your education is our only way forward. Don't let anything stop you." Amara carried those words in her heart like a shield. The national scholarship exam was the biggest opportunity of her life. Passing it meant she could attend one of the country's best universities without worrying about tuition fees. It was her golden ticket out of poverty and into a future where she could save lives. Teachers often said she had the best chance among all the students in her school. She had spent countless nights reading under the dim glow of a lamp, memorizing biology charts, solving math problems, and writing practice essays until her fingers ached. She told herself over and over, one exam could change everything. On the morning of the exam, the sun had just risen when Amara put on her neatly ironed school uniform. Her shoes were old and slightly torn at the edges, but she polished them until they shone. She tied her hair back and picked up her backpack, where she had carefully placed her pens, ID card, and a bottle of water. She whispered a short prayer and hugged her mother, who wished her luck with tears in her eyes. The exam center was a 30-minute walk away. The streets were already busy with cars, buses, and bicycles rushing in every direction. Amara walked quickly, clutching her bag, repeating formulas and definitions silently to herself. Her heart was beating fast, not only from nervousness but also from excitement. This was her chance. She imagined herself years later wearing a white doctor's coat, treating patients, making her mother proud. As she passed a quiet side street near the main road, something unexpected happened. Just a few meters ahead, a woman dressed in an expensive silk dress suddenly collapsed on the pavement. Her handbag fell to the ground and her phone slid across the sidewalk. For a moment, the world around seemed to pause. People glanced at the woman, but walked on, too busy to stop. Some looked with curiosity, but no one stepped forward. Amara froze. She looked at her watch, only 15 minutes left to reach the exam center. If she delayed even a little, the gates would close, and she would lose her chance. But as she looked at the woman lying motionless, her breathing shallow, something inside her stirred. She remembered her father, remembered the helplessness of watching someone suffer when no one stepped in to help. Without another thought, she knelt down, gently shook her shoulder, and asked, "Madam, can you hear me?" There was no response. Amara quickly checked for breathing, just as she had learned in her school's basic health class. The woman's pulse was weak. Panic rushed through her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She shouted for help, waving her arms, but still no one came close. Most people just looked away. Amara grabbed the woman's phone from the ground, unlocked it with a trembling hand, and dialed the emergency number. Speaking quickly and clearly, she explained the situation and gave the location. The operator promised an ambulance was on the way. While waiting, Mara remembered the first aid lessons her science teacher had once demonstrated. She tilted the woman's head slightly, checked her airway, and began chest compressions. Her hands pressed firmly, rhythmically, as she whispered encouragement to herself. "Stay alive. Please stay alive." She counted each push, her forehead dripping with sweat. Finally, the sound of sirens cut through the morning traffic. The ambulance stopped at the corner, and 2 paramedics rushed out with a stretcher. They were surprised to find a young girl doing CPR with such determination. One of them quickly took over, while the other thanked Amara and asked for details. She explained everything clearly, her voice shaking. They loaded the woman into the ambulance, and before Amara could think, one of the paramedics said, "You should come with us. You saved her life." Amara hesitated, looking at the time again. The exam had already started. The doors would be locked, but she couldn't walk away. She climbed into the ambulance, sitting beside the unconscious woman, holding her hand all the way to the hospital. At the hospital, doctors rushed the woman into the emergency ward. Amara stood outside, her backpack still on her shoulders, her hands trembling from exhaustion. She felt a mixture of fear and sadness. Fear for the woman's life and sadness for the opportunity she had just lost. After what felt like hours, a doctor came out and said the patient was stable. Relief washed over Amara, but it was quickly replaced by the heavy truth. The exam was over. She walked out of the hospital into the bright afternoon sun. The streets were busy as usual, people laughing, cars honking, life moving on. But for Amara, it felt like the world had collapsed. She thought of her mother's tired face, of the years of preparation, of the dreams that had kept her awake at night. All gone in a single morning. She whispered to herself, "Maybe I made a mistake." Yet deep down, a quiet voice reminded her that she had done the right thing. With slow steps, she began the long walk home. The next day, Amara walked into her school with heavy steps. Her classmates were already buzzing with excitement, talking about how difficult the exam had been, comparing answers and laughing with relief that it was finally over. For them, it was just another step in their education, another challenge behind them. For Amara, it was a reminder of what she had lost. As soon as she entered the classroom, the whispers started. "There she is. The girl who didn't even show up," one boy whispered loud enough for others to hear. "Can you believe it? All that studying, all those late nights, and she just missed it," another said with a smirk. Some laughed, others shook their heads. Amara kept her eyes down and walked to her desk. She wanted to disappear into the floor. She had always been the top student, the one teachers admired and classmates envied. Now, she was the subject of gossip, pity, and mockery. Her teacher, Mr. Rafiq, entered the room and immediately noticed her. He sighed heavily, as though disappointed in her more than anyone else. "Amara," he said in a stern voice, "why didn't you attend the exam? Do you know how important it was? Do you realize what you've thrown away?" Amara opened her mouth to explain, but the words stuck in her throat. She wanted to say, "I was saving someone's life." But she knew no one would understand. To them, it would sound like an excuse, a foolish story to cover her failure. So she remained silent. Mr. Rafiq shook his head. Such talent, such promise. Wasted. I hope you realize what you've done. Then he turned back to the blackboard, dismissing her as though she were invisible. The day dragged on painfully. Every lesson felt like a punishment. Every laugh from her classmates was another reminder that she was different now. When the final bell rang, she gathered her books and walked home slowly. Carrying the weight of disappointment on her shoulders, her mother was waiting at the door. She had heard from neighbors that Amara had missed the exam. Her eyes were filled with worry as she asked softly, "Why didn't you go, Amara? What happened?" Amara's lips trembled. She wanted to cry, but she held herself back. She told her mother everything about the woman who had collapsed, about calling the ambulance, about missing the exam. Her mother listened in silence, her face a mixture of pride and sorrow. When Amara finished, her mother hugged her tightly. "My brave girl," she whispered. "You did the right thing. You saved someone's life. That is worth more than any exam." But as they sat together in their small apartment, Amara saw the worry lines deepen on her mother's forehead. She knew her mother had been counting on that scholarship. Without it, their future seemed uncertain again. The world was not kind to the poor. One mistake, even a noble one, could close doors forever. That night, Amara lay awake on her thin mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling. She thought of all the nights she had studied, all the sacrifices her mother had made, all the dreams she had whispered to herself. She felt crushed by regret. Maybe she should have walked away from the woman. Maybe she should have focused only on herself. But then she remembered the pale face of the lady, the weak pulse, and the relief in the doctor's voice when he said she was stable. She reminded herself again she had done the right thing. Even if no one understood, across town in a private hospital suite, the woman Amara had saved slowly opened her eyes. Her name was Evelyn Grant. She was the wife of one of the richest businessmen in the country, Richard Grant. The hospital room was filled with flowers, nurses, and the quiet hum of machines. Evelyn felt weak, but she was alive. The doctor smiled when she woke up. "Mrs. Grant, you're very lucky. If not for a young girl who found you, you might not be here today." Evelyn blinked. "A young girl?" The doctor nodded. "Yes, she gave you CPR on the street, called the ambulance, and stayed with you until you were safe here. Without her quick action, the outcome could have been very different." Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes. She tried to imagine the stranger who had cared enough to stop, who had risked her own time to save another person. In her world of luxury cars, private jets, and expensive parties, she rarely met such selflessness. She turned her head and whispered, "Who was she? I must know." But no one could answer. The girl had left quietly, without even giving her name. Evelyn lay in her hospital bed, her heart filled with gratitude and curiosity. She thought about the difference between wealth and kindness. She had all the riches one could imagine, yet it was a poor stranger who had given her the most precious gift, her life. She made a silent promise to herself. "I will find her. I will thank her properly." Back in her small neighborhood, Amara's life returned to its difficult routine. She went to school, endured the whispers and the stares, came home to help her mother, and studied even though she no longer had an exam to look forward to. Her neighbors, too, had heard the story of her mischance. Some shook their heads sadly, calling her foolish. Others pitied her, saying she had wasted her one opportunity. Amara tried to keep her head high, but inside she felt broken. She wanted to believe that good deeds would be rewarded, but every sign around her suggested otherwise. People valued success, not sacrifice. They admired those who won exams, not those who gave them up. Still, she carried the memory of the woman she had saved. Somewhere in the city, that woman was alive because of her. That thought gave her a small measure of peace, but she could not have imagined what was coming next, that her act of kindness, unnoticed by the world, had reached the heart of someone powerful enough to change her life forever. The morning sun crept slowly over the crowded neighborhood, casting long shadows across the narrow streets. Vendors shouted about fresh fruit, children chased each other barefoot, and neighbors carried buckets of water up the stairs of old buildings. Life moved as it always did, but for Amara, the weight of the last few days still pressed on her shoulders. She sat by the window, staring out with distant eyes, wondering how she would rebuild her future after losing her chance at the scholarship exam. Her mother had already gone to work, leaving behind a warm cup of tea and a note that said, "Don't lose hope. My child." Amara sipped the tea slowly, her thoughts heavy. She did not hear the soft hum of an engine at first, but soon the sound of a car approaching silenced the usual noise of the street. People stopped what they were doing. A sleek, black Rolls-Royce glided slowly down the road, its polished surface gleaming like a jewel under the morning sun in this neighborhood. Cars were usually old and rusty, with faded paint and cracked windows. The sight of such a magnificent machine moving smoothly along the broken road was like seeing a swan in a pond of ducks. Children ran to the sidewalks, pointing excitedly. Shopkeepers leaned out of their stalls. Everyone whispered in amazement, "Whose car is that?" One man asked. "It must be lost," another replied. But the car did not pass through. It stopped right in front of Amara's building. The neighbors gasped. Curtains fluttered as people peeked out from their windows. The chauffeur, dressed in a neat black suit with a cap, stepped out and walked with calm dignity toward the narrow staircase that led to Amara's small apartment. Amara was still at the window when she saw the car. Her heart skipped a beat. She had only seen such cars in magazines and movies. She thought perhaps it had stopped by mistake. But then there was a knock at her door. She froze. Slowly, she stood and opened the door. There stood the chauffeur, tall and formal, his white gloves spotless. He gave her a small bow. "Miss Amara?" he asked politely. Her mouth went dry. "Yes. Madam Evelyn Grant wishes to speak with you. She is waiting in the car. Please, come with me." For a moment, Amara could not move. She remembered the name instantly. Evelyn Grant, the woman she had saved. Her pulse quickened. She never thought she would see her again. But, "Why me?" she whispered. The chauffeur smiled gently. "Because you are the one Madam has been searching for." Amara felt her legs trembling as she followed him down the narrow staircase. Outside, the crowd of neighbors had gathered, their eyes wide with curiosity. Some whispered, "What is happening?" Others said, "She must be in trouble." But most simply stared in awe as the poor girl from their street walked toward the Rolls-Royce. The chauffeur opened the back door, and Amara stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of leather and roses. The seats were soft, smoother than anything she had ever touched. And there, sitting gracefully, was Evelyn Grant. Evelyn looked radiant, though still pale from her recent illness. She wore a simple yet elegant dress, her eyes filled with warmth. When she saw Amara, she smiled, tears glistening in the corners of her eyes. "Amara," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "So we finally meet." Amara sat nervously, her hands clasped tightly together. She lowered her gaze. "Madam?" "I didn't expect." Evelyn reached out and gently touched her hand. "Please, call me Evelyn. You don't know what you have done for me. You gave me life when I had none. If not for you, my children would have lost their mother, my husband would have lost his wife. You saved me, and yet you disappeared quietly, asking for nothing in return. Why?" Amara swallowed hard. She struggled to find her voice. I only did what felt right. I couldn't leave you there. I remembered my father. He died because no one helped him. I didn't want anyone else to feel that pain." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. She squeezed Amara's hand firmly. "My dear girl, do you realize what kind of heart you have? In this world, many walk away. Few stop to care. You gave up your own dream that morning, didn't you?" Amara's lips trembled. "Yes, I missed my scholarship exam. It was my only chance. Now, I don't know what will happen." The silence in the car was heavy for a moment. Evelyn closed her eyes, breathing deeply, as though trying to control her emotions. Finally, she opened them and smiled with determination. "Then it is time the world rewards you for what you gave up," Evelyn said firmly. "Amara, I came here today not just to thank you. I came to change your life." Amara blinked in confusion. "Change my life?" Evelyn nodded. "My husband, Richard Grant, is one of the wealthiest men in this country. Together we have the power to open doors that seemed locked to you. We want to sponsor your education, not just in any school, but in the best university. Every fee, every book, every expense, we will cover it. You will not have to worry again." Amara's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes widened. The words sounded like a dream, too good to be true. She shook her head slightly, as though trying to wake up. "But why? I am no one. I come from nothing. Why would you do this for me?" Evelyn smiled warmly. "Because true greatness is not measured by wealth or titles. It is measured by kindness, sacrifice, and courage. You showed all of these when you chose to save me. That kind of heart deserves to be nurtured, not wasted." Tears welled in Amara's eyes. She had endured days of whispers, scolding, and disappointment. She had believed her future was gone. And now, this woman, sitting across from her in a Rolls-Royce, was offering her a future brighter than she had ever dared to imagine, for the first time in many days. Amara smiled, a small, trembling smile that carried both relief and hope. She whispered, "Thank you, Evelyn." "I don't know what to say." Evelyn leaned closer and said softly, "Say nothing. Just promise me that you will use this chance to follow your dream and help others as you once helped me. That will be thanks enough." As the car drove through the streets, past the astonished neighbors still staring, Amara realized that life had turned in a way she could never have predicted. Yesterday, she was a poor girl mocked for missing her exam. Today, she was being offered a chance greater than any exam could have given her, The city rolled past the windows as the car carried her into a future she had thought was lost. The car ride to the other side of the city felt unreal to Amara. She sat quietly, looking out of the window, watching the poor streets of her neighborhood fade into wide, clean roads lined with tall buildings and glowing streetlights. The deeper they drove into the wealthy district, the more everything seemed like another world. Expensive shops with glass windows sparkled in the sunlight. Fountains splashed gently in front of hotels, and security guards in neat uniforms stood outside grand gates. Amara's hands rested on her lap, trembling slightly. She kept telling herself this could not be real. She was just a girl from a small apartment with cracked walls. How could she be sitting in a Rolls-Royce beside the wife of a billionaire? But every time she looked at Evelyn Grant, she saw sincerity in her eyes, not pity. That gave her courage. Finally, the car turned into a long driveway guarded by tall iron gates. Beyond them stood a mansion that looked more like a palace. The garden stretched wide with trimmed hedges, roses blooming in colors she had only seen in magazines, and a fountain in the middle that shone like crystal. The mansion itself was white with tall pillars, balconies, and windows that reflected the sun like mirrors. The chauffeur parked the car in front, and as he opened the door, Amara felt her legs weaken. Evelyn took her hand gently. "Come, my dear. There's someone I want you to meet." Amara followed Evelyn up the wide marble steps and through tall wooden doors that opened into a grand hall. The floors shone like glass. Chandeliers glittered above, and portraits of the Grant family lined the walls. Servants bowed respectfully as they passed, but Evelyn only smiled warmly at Amara, guiding her toward another room. Inside a spacious study filled with shelves of books and polished furniture sat a tall man in his 50s, dressed in a tailored suit. His presence filled the room even before he spoke. His eyes were sharp but kind, and his posture carried the weight of someone who was used to making decisions that affected thousands of lives. This was Richard Grant, Evelyn's husband, and one of the most powerful businessmen in the country. When he saw Amara, he stood and came forward, extending his hand. "So you're the young woman who saved my wife," he said in a deep, steady voice. "I've heard much about you, Amara. You have my gratitude." Amara hesitated for a second before shaking his hand. "I only did what I thought was right, sir." Richard studied her for a moment, then nodded. "That is exactly why we wanted to meet you. In a world where people often think only of themselves, you chose compassion over personal gain. That is rare." Evelyn gently guided Amara to sit, and the three of them settled around a low table. Tea was brought in, along with plates of biscuits and fruit. Though Amara was too nervous to touch any of it, Richard leaned forward slightly. "Evelyn has already told you we wish to sponsor your education. But I want to make something very clear. This is not charity. This is recognition. You gave us something that no wealth can buy. You gave my wife her life. And in return, we want to give you the tools to achieve your dreams. Tell me, Amara, what is it you truly want?" Amara's heart pounded. She had dreamed of this moment so many times, though never under such circumstances. Her voice was quiet but firm when she answered, "I want to become a doctor. I want to help people in my community, people who cannot afford good treatment. I don't want anyone else to go through what my father went through." Evelyn's eyes softened with emotion. Richard's lips curved into a small, approving smile. "A noble goal," he said, "and one that deserves support." He picked up a pen from the table and tapped it lightly against his notebook. "Here's what we propose. We will cover all your educational expenses, tuition, books, uniforms, even living costs. You will attend the best university, and when you graduate, we will help you connect with hospitals where you can gain experience. If you ever wish to study abroad, that too will be arranged. The only thing we ask in return is that you stay true to your dream. Continue to serve with the same selflessness that led you to save my wife." Amara's eyes widened as tears filled them. It was more than she had ever hoped for, more than she had even dared to imagine. She pressed her hands together, struggling to find words. "Sir, madam, I don't know how to thank you. You are giving me back my future. You are giving me more than I ever thought possible." Evelyn reached across the table and touched her hand. "You owe us nothing, Amara. This is your reward for the goodness already inside you. Just promise us one thing. When you have the power to help others, do not hesitate. Be the same brave girl who knelt on the street to save a stranger. Amara nodded, her tears falling freely now. I promise. For the next hour, they spoke about her past, her studies, and her dreams. Evelyn listened with motherly warmth, asking questions about her school life and her friends. Richard asked about her grades, her favorite subjects, and her long-term plans. Both seemed genuinely interested not just in sponsoring her, but in knowing her as a person. As the meeting ended, Richard stood and shook her hand once more. You remind me of something important, Amara, he said. Success is not only about wealth or power, it is about character. And you have shown the kind of character that deserves every chance to shine. From today, consider yourself part of our extended family. You are not alone anymore. Those words echoed in Amara's heart as Evelyn led her back to the car. The servants bowed again as they passed, but this time Amara walked with a new confidence. For the first time, she felt that maybe she belonged in a world beyond her narrow street and small apartment. On the way back, Evelyn spoke softly. Tomorrow, we will take you to visit the university. You will meet professors, and we will begin the process of enrolling you. From now on, you don't need to worry about what you wear, how you travel, or how you will afford books. Everything will be taken care of. Your only job is to study, to learn, and to prepare yourself for the future. Amara could hardly breathe from the rush of emotions. Just days ago, she had been scolded and mocked for missing her exam. She had believed her future was over. But now, sitting once again in the back of the Rolls-Royce, she realized she had been given a second chance, one she would never waste. When she returned home, her mother was waiting anxiously. Seeing the car stop outside their door made her cover her mouth in shock. She could hardly believe it when Amara explained everything that had happened. Tears streamed down her mother's face as she hugged her daughter tightly. God bless you, my child, she whispered. Your kindness has brought light into our lives. That night, Amara lay awake again, but this time her heart was full of hope instead of regret. She thought of the promise she had made to Evelyn and Richard, and she repeated it to herself like a prayer. When I have the power to help others, I will not hesitate. For the first time in a long time, the future looked bright, and Amara drifted to sleep with a smile on her face, ready to begin a new chapter of her life. The morning sun shone brightly through the thin curtains of Amara's small room. But this time, her day began differently. Outside, instead of hearing only the noises of the crowded street and the cries of fruit vendors, she heard the smooth hum of a luxury car waiting downstairs. A Rolls-Royce had once again parked in front of her building, and the neighbors had already gathered to watch. Children pointed with wide eyes, and elders whispered in amazement. Amara put on her simple clothes, neatly pressed, and carried a small bag with her notebooks. Her mother kissed her forehead with tears in her eyes and whispered, Go, my daughter. This is the beginning of everything you dreamed of. Stepping out into the street, Amara felt all eyes on her. She was no longer just the poor girl who missed an exam. She was now someone chosen, someone special, even if she did not fully understand it herself. The chauffeur opened the car door, and she slid into the soft leather seat. Inside sat Evelyn Grant, smiling warmly, dressed in her elegant yet gentle style. Good morning, Amara, Evelyn greeted her. Are you ready for your first visit to the university? Amara nodded, her heart racing with excitement and nervousness. Yes, madam. I mean Evelyn, she corrected herself. Remembering Evelyn's earlier request to call her by name, the car moved smoothly through the city, leaving behind narrow alleys and broken pavements, replacing them with wide tree-lined roads and tall buildings. Amara stared out of the window, unable to believe she was on her way to the kind of university she had only read about. When they arrived, the sight took her breath away. The campus stretched across acres of land with tall modern buildings, green gardens, fountains, and students walking confidently in neat uniforms. The gates were tall, guarded, and painted with the name of the most prestigious medical university in the country. Amara stepped out of the car, her hands trembling as she held her bag tightly. She looked around at the students, some arriving in expensive cars, others chatting in groups. their laughter echoing across the courtyard. For a moment, she felt small again, as though she did not belong here. But Evelyn's hand on her shoulder gave her courage. "Walk with pride, Amara," Evelyn whispered. "You belong here as much as anyone else. You've earned this place." They were greeted by a professor, a kind-looking man with glasses and a gray beard. "Ah, this must be the girl you told us about," he said to Evelyn. Then he turned to Amara with a gentle smile. "Welcome, my dear. We are honored to have you here." The words filled Amara with warmth. She followed the professor as he showed her the lecture halls. Laboratories filled with shining equipment, a large library with rows of books, and dormitories where students stayed. Every corner of the campus seemed like a dreamland to her. As they walked, Evelyn explained to the staff that Amara's education would be fully sponsored by the Grant family. Heads turned, students whispered, and some stared in admiration. Others looked with envy, wondering who this simple girl was and why the wealthy Grant family had chosen her. But Amara kept her head down, determined to prove herself not with money, but with hard work. Later that day, after all the formalities, Amara sat quietly in the library. She opened a book of anatomy and traced her fingers along the pages. She thought of her father, of the helpless night when they could not afford treatment for him, and of the promise she had made to herself to become a doctor. Now, at last, the path was before her. Tears filled her eyes, but they were tears of joy. Days turned into weeks, and Amara slowly adjusted to her new life. Every morning, the Rolls-Royce picked her up and brought her to the university. Though she wore simple clothes, she carried herself with quiet dignity. At first, some students whispered about her background, mocking her modest appearance. But soon, they noticed her intelligence, her discipline, and her kindness. She answered questions in class with confidence, stayed late in the library, and always offered help to anyone who struggled with lessons. Gradually, respect replaced whispers. Evelyn often visited her, guiding her like a mentor, while Richard Grant occasionally came to see her progress. He was a man of few words, but whenever he spoke to Amara, he reminded her that true strength lay in character, not in wealth. "You have what many cannot buy," he once told her. "A pure heart and an unbreakable will. That will carry you farther than money ever could." Amara carried those words like a treasure. At home, her mother's life also began to change. She no longer had to work endless hours cleaning offices. Evelyn quietly arranged for her to work part-time at a community center instead, giving her more rest and dignity. Their small apartment was repaired, the cracks filled, the walls painted, and new furniture brought in. For the first time, their home felt warm and safe. Neighbors who once pitied them now looked at them with admiration. But Amara never let the attention distract her. She remembered the promise she had made to use this chance, not for pride, but for purpose. Every evening after classes, she visited a small local clinic near her neighborhood. There she watched doctors treat patients, learned how to listen carefully, and volunteered to help with paperwork. Even though she was just a student, she wanted to begin serving right away. One evening, while walking back from the clinic, she saw a young boy fall from his bicycle and scrape his knee. Without hesitation, Amara knelt, cleaned the wound with the small first aid kit she carried, and comforted the crying child until his mother arrived. Watching the mother's grateful eyes, Amara realized this was her destiny to be there when others needed her. To give hope where there was fear. Months passed and Amara's reputation at the university grew. Professors admired her dedication, and classmates often came to her for help. She became known not just as the girl who had been sponsored by the grants, but as the student who worked harder than anyone, who studied with passion, and who never refused a request for help. One day, Evelyn and Richard invited her to a family dinner. Sitting at their grand dining table, surrounded by warmth and laughter, Amara felt something she had not felt in years, a sense of belonging. Richard raised his glass and said to Amara, "The girl who gave us back our family and who will one day give hope to thousands more. We are proud to call you family." Amara's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "Thank you for everything." That night, lying in bed, she thought about how far she had come. From the day she had missed her exam and returned home in despair, to now when her future stretched before her, brighter than ever, she realized that sometimes the choices that seem like losses are the very choices that open doors to miracles. Her story was no longer just about a poor girl from a broken neighborhood. It was about courage, sacrifice, and the belief that kindness could change not only one life, but many. As she prepared for the next day's lectures, Amara smiled with quiet determination. The world had given her a second chance, and she would not waste it. One day, she would stand tall in a white coat, healing others. Carrying forward the very spirit that had led her to save Evelyn Grant on that unforgettable morning